is going on, YouTube Universe? Welcome to the Hip and Shoulder, where today, albeit a little bit later in the week, we are dropping another edition of the round recap. If you are new around here, the premise of the video is pretty simple. We sit back and reflect on the week that was with football. Everything from the first game on Thursday right through to the final game of Sunday, and round 6 delivered some of the most unique finishes and display of football that I have seen in a very long time. And it really was one of those rounds where going into it, if you were a tipster, it was one that probably would have thrown you through the ringer a bit, because teams that were expected to perform fell short of the mark. Teams that weren't expected to do so much actually did and overreached a little bit. It was something to behold, trust me. It all kicked off on Thursday night up at the Gabba with Brisbane hosting Collingwood, two teams that have been very much this year on different sides of the spectrum. We have Brisbane, who are the reigning premiers coming into this year. They have found themselves in precarious positions where the slow starts have put them behind the 8 ball, but then they launch a huge rally for the second half and come back to be triumphant. And then you've got Collingwood, who started off a little bit rocky, but have found their feet and really turned their system around to be collectively one of the better defensive and offensive teams in the entire competition. Some might actually argue that Collingwood might actually be the best in the competition right now. And both of those collided head on. Brisbane left the door wide open yet again. Very slow start. They were behind the ball, I think, by quarter time by about 8 points, and then I think it was about 19 points at half time. So they weren't ever out of the game. But that second gear kick in that we have seen over recent weeks with Brisbane just failed to launch. And on the flip side of that, while Collingwood maintained, they started their dominance in the first half, they maintained it so incredibly well in the second, and not just maintained it, they put their foot down and absolutely ran away with the game. So much so that even if Brisbane were to lift their game and try to match what Collingwood were doing, they were never going to catch up. And that just epitomizes what I've been trying to say in these round recaps for weeks. Brisbane was eventually going to start coming up against teams that if they slow started and left the gate open, a team would come along, kick that door off its absolute hinges, and they wouldn't be able to get caught. And that's exactly what Collingwood did. In the end, they ran out victorious 16-9-105, defeating Brisbane 7-11-53. And there were some performances in this game that I felt were alarming. And I'd say more so the fact that Brisbane let Nick Daicos get off the chain as much as he did, when they possibly have one of the best defensive midfielders in the competition in Josh Dunkley. I don't understand how Chris Fagan went into this game and didn't utilise Dunkley as a hard tag on Nick Daicos. Don't get me wrong, he tried Jared Berry. Jared Berry tried his guts out. I think for one quarter, he held Nick Daicos to maybe 6 possessions, which is quite big considering, Nick Daicos not only seagulls kind of around packs to get the feeder ball out and move the ball on, but he just accumulates it. He's an accumulative player. And to keep a player like that to 6 disposals, you've done your job right. But then the tag got dropped the following quarter, and it leaves me scratching my head as to why they went into this game without a proper plan to shut Daicos down, and then when Daicos was getting off the chain, they decided to still not run the tag. Like, they kept him to 6 disposals, then half-time came, and then something completely different happened. I don't know. Did Fagan have a stroke? Collingwood fans were definitely having a stroke in the crowd with how fucking well Nick Daicos ended up playing, I can tell you that much. Not only was the midfield effort of Nick Daicos incredible, but Josh Daicos off of halfback flank this year has been an absolute revelation for Collingwood. His use of the ball has been absolutely electric as a winger over recent years, and just seeing him in a different role but still being able to use that effective kick rolling off of halfback, genius move by Craig McRae. You've got Jamie Elliott, who only had, disposals worth in the teens, which is pretty impressive given he plays a central forward role, but the amount of score involvements this bloke has was absolutely huge. He could have ended up kicking 3 or 4 goals himself. He might have only kicked the 2, but to be involved with so many direct scores just shows the level that he is still competing at. And this is a player that has suffered injury year after year after year. You've got collectively their backline starting to work a lot better, especially the fact that Darcy Moore went down with an injury, which I do have a gripe about, and people might laugh it off, but we remember Ryan Mansell 3 weeks ago got suspended for said 3 weeks for pushing a St Kilda player into a contest which caused concussion. I would still argue Mansell was pushing a player that was already in the process of moving towards the contest anyway. Similar circumstances in this game with Logan Morris against Darcy Moore. Darcy Moore going in for the contest. Logan Morris pushes him. He gets knocked out. Now, he ends up getting back up off the ground. Knocked out, I mean, he gets fucking plastered. He's not knocked out, that needs to be carried off. But still sustains a hard enough knock to have blood coming out of the side of his head. Was not a good look. It did actually look like it was coming out of his ear, because he had a lot of ear padding at the end of the game. But that wasn't enough to warrant any suspension or even to be looked at by the AFL. And I think there is a lack of consistency here. They have just gone and basically revealed to the AFL community that it is okay to push as long as the player doesn't suffer a serious injury like concussion. And regardless of Darcy Moore being hit hard enough for, to force blood, they deemed that Logan Morris's push apparently didn't equate to the contest, and I think they got it wrong, but we're not going to dwell on it because we'd be here for a long time. But two teams here, again, we are expecting different things from them this year. We expected Brisbane were going to come out hot, they were going to come out firing. They end up fumbling the ball for their first loss of the year, mind you, and their first loss, I say that in a way that, they could have lost 2 or 3 more games this year had they not been able to mount those comebacks. The comeback against the Bulldogs was absolutely sensational, and I think that's why a lot of Brisbane fans in this game would have had hope that they were able to overcome, because they were within a 42-point margin, I believe, at three-quarter time, and that would have been enough to think, oh, we've come back from this, we can do that. But when Collingwood is playing this good, scarily good, you're not going to chase down any bastard. It was just a start-to-finish incredible performance from Collingwood that, as I said, has a lot of people now regarding them, especially people in the media, talking up that Collingwood are back to their best and might be one of the best teams in the competition again. Scary thought. Good Friday saw 2 games of football go down, starting with the more traditional Good Friday hit-out at Marvel Stadium between North Melbourne and Carlton. And the outcome of this game, as you would come to expect, has caused a lot of uproar, discussion and conjecture within the AFL community. Why, do you ask? The discrepancy in score. Because in the end, North Melbourne 11-5-71 was defeated by Carlton 24-9-153. While it was good to see 35 goals kicked collectively for the game, knowing that every goal generates money for the Good Friday appeal, it is still a incredible thought to think that while North Melbourne piled on 11, Carlton managed to kick 13 more. And this could have very well been, if accuracy had played any effect, a 100-point loss. And I saw a post going around on social media showing the outcomes of North Melbourne over recent years when it comes to this spot. And the conjecture now talks about the fact that maybe North Melbourne shouldn't have the Good Friday slot. They've been synonymous with the spot for years, don't get me wrong, but now when it comes to the fact that you're going to be looking at defeats like this, and we have seen consistent downfall within this round for North Melbourne, you need to start thinking whether some bigger marquee games can start slotting in. We know on the calendar we have games like Dreamtime at the G, Richmond and Essendon. We have the Anzac Day clash between Essendon and Collingwood. Those games are so synonymous with the AFL calendar that regardless of where each team is going to be on the ladder at that particular time, they are both going to rise to the occasion. The unfortunate thing here is the North Melbourne Football Club, when it's come to this game over recent years, hasn't risen to that occasion, to that moniker. Carlton has won convincingly. Prior to that, it was other teams that were winning convincingly. I'm curious to know at home how you guys feel about this. Do you think North Melbourne should keep this Good Friday slot, or is it time to move it on to another club who's going to be a bit more competitive for the cause? This game was dead in the water by quarter time as well. 2-2 playing 7-3, being 5 goals behind the mark. Then we shift on to halftime and they're 6 goals behind, and you start to think maybe they can get competitive in the second half. It's okay, we'll wait and see. 15 goals played, 7 in that third term, and then North Melbourne went on to kick 4 goals, 1 for the rest of the game, and in that final term alone, Carlton piled on 9 goals, 3. Again, could have been a 100-point loss, and I feel if it had have been, this conversation point would have been driven more by the media. I feel there has been not much talk around it, and Kane Cornes has been one of those people that has openly spoken about his distaste for where North Melbourne are sitting. I do feel when it comes to Kane Cornes that there are particular teams that are always loaded in the barrel for him. Namely, those teams are Richmond, St Kilda and North Melbourne. As a Richmond man, you're probably at home watching this thinking that I'm showing a little bit of bias towards saying that Richmond are in the gun in a negative way, but you've only got to see how he's spoken about Richmond and these other 2 clubs in recent years to know when they slip up, Canes is happy to start firing. And I think this time it's justified because North Melbourne has been behind the 8 ball. They have had all these top-end draft picks. They have gone and brought other senior heads into the club. They're now questioning whether Jack Darling was a good trade. Caleb Daniel definitely has been. Luke Parker has played his role. I personally think Jack Darling has been great for that club, and the leadership and knowledge that he's going to impart on players like Nick Larkey and Whitlock and Coleman Jones, those type of players, is going to be absolutely invaluable. So there are some, discussion points that I don't agree with, but it is still interesting to see that with how much North Melbourne has struggled and the concessions that have come with that to support them, they still haven't moved forward collectively. And you look at that draft list and it comes down to list management and how they have always attacked at the top end midfielders, and then they're using those midfielders as defenders. They're not picking up players to fit certain roles. I don't know. We could sit here talking hours about North Melbourne where they're currently at, but unfortunately the conversation point this week is North Melbourne is not good enough to hold a marquee slot like Good Friday. And on the flip side of things, Carlton coming out and winning by this margin when they've got some key components missing starts giving the Carlton faithful hope that they can turn their shit around. I'm not sure they can, but we'll see what happens. The second game on Good Friday was later that night over at Optus Stadium with West Coast hosting Essendon, and this was a game that for majority of looked like West Coast were going to pull a home game heist, and I was absolutely blown away with how impressive West Coast looked. When you look at the snake, the match timeline from start to finish, they had a hot jump, West Coast. At quarter time, they had kicked 5 goals straight to 1 goal 2. Shifting to halftime, they were 7 goals 3, playing 4 goals 3. So Essendon came back, started to wrestle momentum back, but during the start of that particular quarter, West Coast got out to a bigger lead, and then Essendon managed to wrestle it back. And then after that, it was a stalemate for a bit, but they pushed on, and West Coast still at 3-quarter time led 9 goals 7 to 9 goals 7. It was a draw. Yes, they came back to a draw. At one point in that quarter, however, they were leading by a sizable margin, and Essendon just found a way to pull it back in. So the fact that it was head-to-head at 3-quarter time, given the dominance West Coast had rolled with, it was a dice roll going into the final quarter. And unfortunately, as much as West Coast fought valiantly late in the game to try to wrestle it back, Essendon just came out and flipped the switch. And it's actually quite impressive to think that happened, because they, 2 weeks ago, lost Nick Bryan, their ruckman. In this game, they lost Sam Draper, their other ruckman. So Peter Wright had to shift into a ruck-based role, which is not a role he plays, but I mean, 2-meter Peter, he's fucking big enough to do it. And the West Coast midfield were dominant in this game. The defensive line were absolutely fantastic. The forward line kind of dropped off a little bit. I feel Jake Waterman was dominant in the first half, went missing in the second half. It was a very interesting watch collectively. And West Coast just failing at the end to just get the job done. 2 points as well. They tried so hard, West Coast, to come back, but Essendon just being able to settle shit down with the injuries they had picked up in this game and just managed to keep control and composure. Absolutely incredible by them. It was a real gutsy win. It is a win they personally, I feel, should have never had, because West Coast were just in such a prime position at halftime to have this game locked up that it was just incredible to see the drop off. And again, players like Waterman still played well. He kicked 4. He had a handful of score involvements, but after a certain point was kind of missing. Couldn't see him. You had players like Jack Graham try his guts out all game. Liam Baker, probably not the level that we have seen him play at, dropped off a little bit. Jeremy McGovern in defence battled so hard. But when you've got a player like Peter Wright, who has missed so much football, come in and be a match winner effectively off his own boot when the game comes down to 2 points, but you've kicked 6 yourself and you're shifted from full forward into the ruck because your ruckman has gone out injured. Huge. But there's obviously ramifications that have come out of this game, because Sam Draper's injury is going to have him set, I believe, to miss the rest of the season, if I'm not mistaken, which means at this point they've lost both their ruckmen. Peter Wright's probably going to have to play a ruck-based role for the rest of the year. I don't know whether he has the tank to do so, because while he is a huge man, he is built as a key forward. He is used for burst leads and kicking goals. I don't know whether he's got the endurance to be running around the field all day. It's going to be a huge test for Essendon moving forward. West Coast, on the other hand, fumbling a very winnable game. And I went into this round passing judgment saying that I didn't know when West Coast were going to win their next game, because we've seen how they had played leading up to this game, and it was very hard to imagine maybe potentially beating a Richmond or a North Melbourne, but outside of that, not much was going to happen. So the fact that they came out with this huge start, I thought, fuck, I've put my foot in it, and I've actually, made them turn shit around. Like, subconsciously, my words have fueled them. Unfortunately, that flame fizzled. The first of a few on Saturday saw Melbourne hosting Fremantle at the MCG, and again, 2 teams, different sides of the spectrum. Melbourne yet to win a game and way off the mark this year compared to their usual standards, and Fremantle, who I touted as a top 8 team, many touted as a top 4 team, but inconsistency has creeped into their game way too much. They'll lose a game, they'll win a game. And it was funny, because coming off of the gather round, I did say, after Fremantle made an absolute meal out of Richmond, they could go in and lose this week, because it is very Fremantle to do. And that's exactly what happened, because Melbourne ended up picking up their first win of the year, and it was a game, again, that outside of the first quarter wasn't really all too competitive in the way of Melbourne being able to maintain control. At quarter time, it was Melbourne 6 goals 1, playing Fremantle 4 goals 2. You're only behind the ball by a few points, a handful of points. You're only behind by 11. It is very manageable to bring that back. At halftime, they stemmed the flow to 21 points. Again, not out of the realm of possibility, but Melbourne came out in that second half, and while Fremantle did put a late push in that final term to bring the score line back, Melbourne did enough to secure the win, and it was on the back of performances from players like Max Gawn, who we've seen up and down. He had, that earlier comments made earlier in the year that he was dealing with a personal issue, and that's why he was down on input. But he seemed to shake in that, because he's coming back to his best. And, all the defensive marks he was taking played a huge part in this game. Cozzy Pickett decides to come out and play one of the best games I've ever seen him play in kick 5. He was arguably best on ground. In my opinion, he was. Some people might argue against, but just collectively for an overall performance, Cozzy Pickett was huge. Fremantle had players that battled. Andrew Brayshaw, again, a lot of people have been talking about Caleb Sarong, but I feel Andrew Brayshaw has been Fremantle's best player this year. Shea Bolton played a good game. Josh Tracy, I don't understand. No Jake Lever. No Stephen May. Tracy kicks 1 goal. Jai Miss, who has been going amiss for weeks, kicks 3. I just don't understand how Fremantle failed to fumble this. It was set up for them to win. Incredibly so. Melbourne have prided themselves on recent years on their defensive pressure, and the defensive, duality teamwork of Lever and May have been one of the best combinations in the competition in recent years. Take them out, and I thought Fremantle's forward line were going to absolutely bust Melbourne open, but in the end, it wasn't to be. With Melbourne skipping out Victoria 16 goals 11 107, playing Fremantle's 14 13 97, 10 points the way of Melbourne. Did turn out to be one of the better games of the round, and I wouldn't have expected that, to be quite honest with you, given how Melbourne had played up until this point in time. But now that Melbourne is on the board, does this create the hunger and the desire within them to continue carrying this momentum on? With Fremantle, they need to fucking sort out what's going on, because they play incredibly well one week and then they're not good enough the following week. So standard has been set. Next week, heading into round 7, well, later on tonight, because that's when this video is going to drop, because I've slacked this week. But Melbourne's playing Richmond later tonight. Very winnable game for both clubs, I feel, given the circumstances coming out of this particular round. I can't remember who Fremantle is playing, but I think they're back on their home deck. They'd want to win this game, because if they lose at home 2 in a row, not a good look. Saturday afternoon at Adelaide Oval played host to one of the scrappiest games of football I've ever witnessed. And there's even people that have been making memes saying, where are the AFLW haters that are commenting on low-scoring games? Because this game collectively was incredibly low-scoring. For the whole game, 11 goals were kicked between both teams, 20 behinds collectively as well. And don't get me wrong, weather did play into it. It was pissing down rain. There was fucking wind coming out of their asses down at Adelaide Oval. But Adelaide hosting GWS, giving the sample size we got out of Gather Round, I thought GWS were going to run absolutely rampant over Adelaide. The orange tsunami, I felt, was going to be way too much for Adelaide to contain. And that was never the case. May I remind people that are sitting at home, up until three-quarter time, GWS had only kicked 2 goals for the entire game. Up until halftime, prior to that, 1 goal. Duck egg in the first, and for the rest of the game, they only managed to kick 2 goals. It was a real odd shift to think that GWS, that had absolutely dismantled St Kilda the week before, having a look at this timeline, they ended the first quarter on 3 behinds. They were at halftime 1 goal 4. At three-quarter time, 2 goals 8. And at full time, at the end of the fourth quarter, 4 goals 10. And you look at Adelaide, 3 goals 2 at quarter time. 3 goals 5 at halftime. 6 goals 7 at three-quarter time. And given the scrappy nature of the game, it was pretty much game over at that point. They went on to kick 1 goal 3 for that term. So let me just break it down even further. For the first half of football, we saw 4 goals kicked. And for the second half of football, we saw, what? 5, 6? 6. 6 goals. I had to pause because math wasn't mathing, but that is so incredible to think of. Just to imagine that 2 teams. Now, Adelaide, obviously, we've seen consistency issues with them in the past. So to have an outcome and a score line like this from Adelaide, it can be perceived and it can be believed, because we have seen them fumble the ball many times before. But GWS, 1 goal and a half of football, 2 goals in 3 quarters of football, 4 goals in full completion. I mean, yeah, okay, collectively, if they only kicked maybe 4 or 5 of those behinds as goals, they win the game. But that's hindsight, and hindsight's a pain in the ass at the best of times. It was just mind-blowing. I'm sitting here still trying to figure out words on how to explain the drop-off. And when you look at the stats of this game, the stats are absolutely padded with GWS players dominating all across the field. Let me just bring them up live. Let's have a look here. Lockie Whitfield in defence had 39 disposals. Tom Green had 36. Lockie Ash had 29. You had Finn Callaghan, 27. Connor Iden, defender, 26. Sam Taylor, fullback, he had 20. Jordan Dawson had 27. That was the most for any Adelaide player. But they made better use of the ball. And I still feel there were some GWS players out of this game that were quote-unquote best on ground. Like, they were a lot better. They were infinitely better than other Adelaide players. But to think you had players like Whitfield, Green, Ash, Callahan, Iden, Sam Taylor, Jacob Weir even had 18 disposals. That all of them were getting plenty of the ball, and they were doing absolutely fuck all with it. And it's a shame because Whitfield and Green, I feel, were incredibly dominant in this game. When it comes to me voting for the MVP award later in this video, those are two names that you are going to see pop up, because I feel Lockie Whitfield and Tom Green were amongst the top 3 players in that game. But you just can't have players getting that much and getting no reward from it because other people failed to live up to expectation. I mean, Jake Stringer, he kicks 1 goal 3, mind you. You've got Josh Kelly, he kicks 1 goal. Darcy Jones kicks 1 goal. And the other goal for GWS came from... Where'd it come from? Jake Stringer kicked 1. Kelly kicked 1. Darcy Jones kicked 1. It says they kicked 4 goals. Where am I looking here? Am I missing somebody completely, or did they fuck up? They might have fucked up. No, Harvey Thomas, he kicked 1. There you go. I'm just being a dickhead. But when you have Toby Green, who has been absolutely dominant, doesn't kick a goal for the game. He ends up only scoring, if I can find his name, he kicked 1 behind. Absolutely incredible to think somebody that's been that dominant in their forward 50 couldn't get any composure at all. You know, McMullen's been okay when given opportunity. O'Halloran's been okay when given opportunity. Cadman kicked 3 behinds. Couldn't convert a goal in front of the sticks. You know, Toby Bedford has popped up and done some things forward half of the ball. It's just incredible to think that so many players from GWS... I'm taking the loss from GWS here a hell of a lot harder than the win for Adelaide, because I feel when you look at the two teams in isolation, GWS should have won this game by a landslide, given where both of these teams are at. But to see them struggle to score... Don't know if there's alarm bells ringing, but there would have been paint absolutely ripped off those fucking club room walls at the end of the game by Kingsley. I can tell you what, if you were wearing a GWS jumper and you were in that room, you were going to cop a fucking mouthful. Moving on from that game, because I don't want to dwell on it, because I don't have words, but we've got to move on to the next game, because I personally am very fucking excited. When it comes to my tipping, I always say when I tip against Richmond, I'm happy for Richmond to upset that tip and win and give me a loss. But they came out in this game with such vigor, such, you know, creativeness with their ball movement, with such excitement that we haven't seen since they defeated Carlton. Now, they put on a great job against Brisbane, don't get me wrong, but this was a different beast with Richmond, and there was obviously some conjecture that came out of this game as well, because Noah Bolter obviously came in for selection a couple of, you know, days prior to him getting his sentence from the courts, which has happened. We'll touch on that shortly. But Noah Bolter played absolutely incredible. It was great to hear the Richmond crowd get behind him. If you ask me, personally, probably should have waited to play after the sentencing was finished, but I can see where they would have been at. Richmond wanted to get the win. It's against the Gold Coast. It's against Hardwick. It was a win that the club really wanted to dig deep for, and if Noah Bolter's available for selection, Noah Bolter's going to get picked, and he did get picked, and he absolutely towed up Ben King, who has been dominating the competition every week forward of the ball. This was a game that Richmond was never behind. They were always in front. At quarter time, they led 3 goals 4 to 2 goals 3. Half time, they moved on to 6 goals 5 against 3 goals 9. 12 goals 6 played 4 goals 11 at 3/4 time. We jumped out. We jumped out to a 43-point lead. I couldn't fucking believe it. Then we managed to only kick 2 points in the final quarter, with Gold Coast coming home incredibly strong, kicking 5 goals 4. That's a little bit alarming to me in the fact that Richmond allowed that drop-off. However, I've said it over recent weeks, with the young list we've got, with the inexperienced team that we're playing, we're going to see drop-off in endurance, in longevity, and we are going to hemorrhage goals late. And it's been the case for Richmond. You have a look at us over the course of the year. We beat Carlton, yes. We put up a strong effort against Brisbane, yes. But there were still incremental drop-offs over the other games where we were competitive for a half of football or three-quarters of football and then fell off the face of the earth. And it was very much the same in this game. It was just lucky that we had that 43-point gap at three-quarter time, managing to come home with an 11-point win. I will take any amount of points at the end of the day as our buffer. To get a win over the Gold Coast at Marvel, I think is hilarious, because Damien Hardwick's meme of he doesn't like playing or travelling to Marvel Stadium gets to continue, and it doesn't involve Richmond in a negative context now, which is fucking amazing. Moving on to Noah Bolter slightly. His conviction has been handed out. It involves a 2-year, consequences for 2 years that he's got to follow through with. But the biggest consequence I feel that hurts him directly in the immediate future is a 3-month curfew where he has to be home between the hours of 10 p.m. and 6 a.m., which means he can no longer take part in night matches for the AFL, which means he has been ruled out of tonight's game against Melbourne. He will not be able to play the Dreamtime at the G game against Essendon. And at this point in time, there is a game, I believe, in GWS where we play at NG Stadium of the afternoon, but because he has to be home by a certain time, he won't be back into Melbourne until well after 10 p.m. So he can't play that game either. My viewpoint is a person that would be found guilty in a court of assault but not jailed, to have community service or suspended sentence or whatever the case may be, they wouldn't have their job impacted. And if they played, not if they played, if they worked, because we'll get to Bolter in a minute, if they worked night shift and that was their main income, they could have argued that in the court, and the judge might have made altercations to say that when you're at work, you can, have that curfew kind of abolished, but, you need to be home on other times. I can understand Noah Bolter did this act of a night time and he had been drinking, so obviously the curfew stands, but he is a footballer, and I feel this curfew doesn't hurt him as much. It hurts the club, because that now means that we have a player unavailable for selection, and when he plays as well as he does, it impedes Richmond as a whole. And I believe Richmond wanted to appeal that decision, but the judge decided against it. So there are people that are against it, there are people for it. I mean, some people feel that Noah Bolter got off lightly, so taking that 3-month suspension is something that he has done willingly, because of the concessions that were made for him. The media is beating it up. I felt bad for Adam Uze. They want to talk about Melbourne versus Richmond, and straight away people are like, let's talk about Noah Bolter. And Richmond went into defense mode and said, we've been talking about Noah Bolter for weeks, it's time to move on, the sentencing's been done. And to have some media personnel talking about Richmond dragging the story on. Richmond never dragged the story on. They never put the fucking story in the public eye. The media kept driving the fucking attention, and they're still trying to do so. I just want to move on. Because there's some great things to talk about from Richmond. Seth Campbell, his ball use this year has him rated by Champion Data as a top 35 player. Tom Brown, his ball use this year has him rated amongst the top 35 players. Sam Lawler, as an 18-year-old, is knocking on the door by Champion Data standards, just outside of the top 100 players of the competition. And when they were speaking to somebody from Champion Data, they turned around and said when Sam Lawler moves from the forward line into the midfield, his midfield time sees him absolutely dominating Champion Data stats. I am so excited about this kid and Richmond as a whole collectively moving forward. With the Gold Coast, don't think it's panic stations at all. I mean, there were some games I think they were lucky to escape with a win, especially the one against Adelaide. They fought valiantly here. We know they don't travel all too well. They'll get back to their best. They're back at People's First Stadium this week. They're going to pick up another win. So I don't think they're too concerned. It probably would have hurt Damien Hardwick's ego to lose to Richmond a little bit. But if you're a Richmond fan and if you're a Richmond man like me, we're up in a fucking bout, baby. Get around us. The first of 3 on Sunday saw Sydney hosting Port Adelaide at the SCG. And again, 2 teams that have been there and about, but they've been behind the standard, I feel. We've got Port Adelaide, who can have a dominating week one week and then fall off a cliff the next. And Sydney, I feel they've been hampered too much by injury this year. No Tom Papley. They've had Logan McDonald out with injury. Joel Amati goes down with injury, so now their forward line is a little bit haphazard. You've got no Errol Goulden, arguably one of the best users of the football outside of the defensive and forward 50s. And players like Chad Warner and Isaac Heaney haven't been living up to the standard that they set back in 2024. But back on their home deck, I would have expected them to be a little bit more competitive. And this was a game that Port Adelaide led from start to finish, despite a late flurry from Sydney in the final quarter, which came off of the boot of Aaron Francis, who sat there as a substitute all game. They activate him late. He comes out and kicks 3 or 4 goals, and he was almost a game changer off of his own boot. They end up falling by, 8 points, I believe, in the end. It was incredibly close. They had their chances late, but it was just too much. I personally feel might upset some Port Adelaide fans out there. There were some decisions late in that game that I feel went the way of Port Adelaide that shouldn't have, and it took the sting out of the game so much. And as a neutral supporter, I hate to see it, because you hate to see a decision made that just completely rorts the entire game. And unfortunate as it was, Sydney failed to get the job done. Port Adelaide pick up a huge win on the road, which is something that is not really synonymous with Port Adelaide. We know they dominate Adelaide Oval, but on the road, they're kind of, hit and miss. But getting the job done at the SCG against Sydney is always a huge takeaway for anybody who is taking them on. Again, though, this was a game that the standard culprits all stood up pretty tall. I mean, collectively for the game for Port Adelaide, it was Connor Rozee, it was Zach Butters. Since Zach Butters has come back into this team, I feel Port Adelaide have been a completely different beast, because not only is Zach Butters, one of those players that has the ability to accumulate, he's damaging with the ball and his ball use. He's very much to Port Adelaide what an Errol Goulden is to Sydney. So getting him back in the team really gets them up and about again. But players like Jason Horne-Francis, after a huge game a few weeks ago, he's kind of dropped off the mark a little bit. Other players stood tall. I mean, Willie Rioli kicked a couple, Mitch Georgiades kicked a couple, Sam Powell-Pepper kicked a couple, but they're still very unsure of how their forward line is going to function, I feel. If a Willie Rioli misses or a Georgiades misses, I feel they're left in the wind and the lurch a little bit. For Sydney, I said Aaron Francis gets subs on, he kicks 3, Hayden McLean kicks 2, Heaney kicks 2, Will Hayward kicks 2, but you're still missing big names. We don't have a McDonald out there. We don't have a Joel Amati out there. Caden Cleary comes in, doesn't really have much impact, but he's still young, he's still finding his feet. Riley Bice, a little bit off the mark of where he's at, but again, he's a debutant this year, so we're not expecting much. Nick Blakey was a little bit off the mark with some of his ball use, but he still accumulated a fair bit and he moved it a long way. I couldn't fault the effort of some Sydney players. I feel it's the injuries that are starting to compact them, because they're having injuries happen to key personnel. When you have your 2 forwards go down, you're essentially your number 1 and your number 2, and you're left with a Hayden McLean as your number 1. No knock to Hayden McLean, because he battled hard in this game, but he's doing it alone. He doesn't have support. Errol Goulden's kick inside 50, I feel, is one of the most valuable assets from anybody in the competition for any team. I rate him as the best kick inside 50 in the comp by a mile. Take that out of Sydney's structure, what do you have? And then you've got the added compactedness of the fact that they've got a new coach this year. Dean Cox has taken the reins. He's got new standards he wants to set. He's got new game plans he wants to play. He's got new strategies to put in place, and it's going to take time to click. So we might see Sydney fall off the mark a little bit. They're going to come back up as soon as things start moving. I still feel with Port Adelaide, even though they picked this win up, I don't think they're going the right way about still having Ken Hinkley as coach. I think Josh Carr should be already named as the coach for next year. He should already be heir apparenting this year. He should be getting shadowed by Hinkley. Hinkley should take a backward step and put Josh Carr in the box seat and make sure Josh Carr's doing the right thing. Again, I don't know whether Hinkley is a man who has too much pride. I don't know whether he has an ego. That's just all assumptions. But as a club, and I know Koshy likes to kiss Hinkley on the dick, let's get real, I would be sitting down and saying to Ken by the midpoint of the year, time for you to pull back a bit. We're going to put Josh Carr in the box seat. We want to make sure you drive him in the right direction. Just my opinion, not going to happen, but that's what I'd be doing. At Marvel Stadium, the Bulldogs hosted St Kilda in an absolute fucking bloodbath. The return game of Marcus Bontempelli, arguably the best player in the competition, especially one that should have had at least 1 or 2 Brownlows by this point in time, but always seems to miss out for some unbeknownst fucking reason, comes back and absolutely shows the AFL world why he has that moniker, why he has that mantle, why so many people hold him in high regard. And with the return of the captain, it must have had some invigoration within the club, whether there was some highly motivated individuals, some inspiration sprinkled on like Salt Bay, because the Bulldogs 18-19-127 defeated St Kilda 8-8-56. And it kind of points fingers more at St Kilda than it does Bulldogs, because we know the Bulldogs this year have been an incredibly powerful team. They got a huge jump on Brisbane and fell a little bit short. It was very unfortunate. But take that out of the equation, they've been pretty competitive, and they've been doing it without Bontempelli. Bontempelli comes back in, and they absolutely dominate. To think that they've still got players to come back on top of that, Bulldog Army get fucking rowdy, I'm telling you right now, because the Bulldogs might be marching on to finals actions this year, and they could do some damage, because they looked fucking impressive in this game. And St Kilda never looked a chance outside of quarter time. Quarter time, they led by 2 points. They then were behind the mark by 28 at half time. Can they wrestle it back maybe? I don't know. But when the Bulldogs go on to kick almost 40 points in the next a quarter of football to 15 or 16 points, and then collectively for the rest of the game, the Bulldogs went on to kick a further 5 goals, 6 against St Kilda's 2 goals straight. I have some questions that have been asked about St Kilda, and I think we're going to take the time to not talk about the Bulldogs, because the Bulldogs were impressive. There's nothing to unpack. They were absolutely sensational, apart from the fact that Sam Darcy injured his knee, was out of the game early, but thankfully he has managed to avoid any PCL or ACL injury. He'll still be out for a couple of weeks, but it's a huge difference than missing up to 12 months. Before St Kilda, I'm going to turn attention to this particular channel, because I had some questions asked of me this week, and I would like to turn attention to those questions directly, because I read them and I thought they were fantastic, and I think working down the list about them, one-on-one progressively as we go, I think is the way to go. I think that's how we're going to do it. So, the questions that have been asked of me come from Liam Muir, so I appreciate the comments. We've been having a bit of a back and forth on my previous What Did We Learn from Round 5 video, and he asked me my opinions on Ross Lyon being the coach of St Kilda. That's how things started, and I spoke about how I thought he's still very much in a defensive sound mindset, and he has drafted and planned accordingly. But the questions I now have, we have 5, and we're going to go down the list. The first question is, and it starts with, did you see yesterday's game? I would be very interested to hear talk about certain things following this game in your recap video, including, number 1, how the coach and players are talking things up, like we need to have some conversations and should just start showing some on-field action. It is easy to say in front of the media, there are players that aren't performing and, we need to be having conversations. But there is a difference between having those conversations and being a coach like Michael Voss, for example, or Craig McRae, or, those coaches that are happy to swing the axe on players. Simon Goodwin did it this week by dropping Bailey Fritsch from round 5 heading into round 6. The hard decisions need to be made, and the better coaches in the competition will do it. It is easy to sit there and say, X, Y, and Z didn't perform well enough. We're going to have a talk to them and we're going to make sure they do better. Make an example of them. And it doesn't matter if they're a first-year rookie or they're a 10-year veteran. If they're not performing, drop them. West Coast only did it this, heading into last week or the week prior by sending Tim Kelly back to the waffle. They've already got enough injuries to their midfield, and they still cut their best available midfielder because he wasn't performing. Do it, because there are players in this team that haven't lived up to the mantle this year. Jack Steele is their captain, and yet has been nearly non-existent on the field all year. That leads to a question, the next question actually. how Jack Steele was non-existent as a captain. He could very well still be imparting leadership to them at quarter time, half time, 3/4 time. He might be out on the field, pointing fingers, shouting knowledge. But you need to lead by example. Again, words aren't enough. Actions put shit into place and move things forward. And I feel, even though Jack Steele collectively, I feel, has been a great pickup for the club, he has been a great captain, it might be time for St Kilda to start reanalyzing things and working out whether he is the man to move things forward. Personally, I'm going to throw a spanner in the works. We're going to talk about something else and then we're going to talk about it collectively. But I think there is a kid in this team that is primed to be St Kilda's next captain, and we're going to talk about that momentarily. Point 3 made here is that while our forward aspirations are weak, their midfield is equally as deplorable as exposed by the Bulldogs' midfield. And I could not agree more. Jack Steele, not up to standard. Jack McRae, arguably one of the better midfielders in the competition for the first 5 rounds of football. But he's had a drop-off over the last couple of weeks. I don't know whether that's age. I don't know whether we've seen him at his peak and he's dropping off his best. But when you set a standard and you fall short of it, it's going to be incredibly noticeable. And again, this is where I feel St Kilda have failed over a number of years. When it comes to the draft, they have always been defensively sound. I made a joke this year, heading into the 2025 draft, that Ross Lyon was going to use back-to-back picks on a defender, and he did. They took Alex Taru, they took Toby Travalia, and both of them are, well, I would say Taru may be a utility, but both of them drafted as defensive units, and it's just incredible to think that a draft that boasted so many midfield possibilities, like they could have taken a Bo Allen, who although is a defensive player, can roll through the midfield. They could have taken a Xavier Lindsay, because I'm pretty sure Melbourne took they took Harvey Langford, and then St Kilda had back-to-back picks, and then they took Xavier Lindsay after that. They could have taken Xavier Lindsay, who has been a great pickup for Melbourne. It's just very interesting. I think they've missed the ball and the boat when it comes to their draft, and it moves on to the next point, how St Kilda have to attract talent or star players despite all the money they've splashed around. You've got players linked to them like Finn Callaghan was offered like all these millions of dollars to leave GWS, and Tom De Koning is apparently all but signed at St Kilda, being offered millions of dollars, and you've got this player linked to St Kilda offered millions of dollars. You've got to attract star power, but you need to make sure you've got enough money left to keep the stars that you've already got, because I'm telling you right now, as somebody looking inward to St Kilda, they need to have their eyes set on locking Nasiah Wanganeen-Malira away long term and shifting captaincy. Nasiah Wanganeen-Malira would be my choice as the next captain for St Kilda, because he leads by example every week. He is absolutely sensational as a player, and that is the type of player that you want to see leading a club. He is always 100% hard-nosed at the ball, never goes missing. What more could you ask for? Final point here, and I think it is incredibly prudent. Have we spoken whether or not Ross Lyon should be their coach? And we have many times, and I've spoken about the fact that I feel Ross Lyon isn't going to take St Kilda to their next premiership. I still feel he is very much the same coach he was when he left St Kilda to go to Fremantle. He took that defensive mindset with him. It took Fremantle to a grand final, didn't get them anywhere, and he's come back to St Kilda, and we've seen them fail to fucking hit the mark again. I genuinely feel, as much as Ross Lyon has a brilliant football mind, I have had the opportunity through being a junior AFL coach myself back in the day, going through coaching sessions with Ross Lyon and picking his brain, and he's got one of the most sound minds of the game that I have ever had the privilege to sit down and listen to and speak to one-on-one. But I don't think he's the man. I definitely think moving forward, St Kilda need to find themselves a replacement. I don't know where that comes from. I don't know who that's going to be. Some people very well may feel, and I've seen it thrown around, some people think that maybe Ken Hinkley could move on from Port Adelaide and take over at St Kilda. I don't know. I just feel that maybe a fresh face at St Kilda and a bit of a shake-up of the leadership group could hold them in good stead moving forward, because you've got Jack Steele getting older. He's getting older. How old is Jack Steele? I want to have a look. Let's do some real-time calculations right now. Let's break the fourth wall a little bit and see how old Jack Steele is, because I reckon he'd be in his 30s, right? He's 29. Okay, so he's got a couple of years left, I reckon. He'd probably push to maybe 32, maybe 33. Do you keep the captaincy on him for those years, or do you look at a young kid that you can rally behind for the next 10 years as your captain? That's my thought. We know their forward line is a shambles. Max King's injury keeps pushing him back, but there was even talk about St Kilda moving Max King on. They let go of Tim Membry. I feel that was a fumble, because with Max King out, what have they got? They used Rowan Marshall a little bit up forward. They've got Boyd in the wings that could be playing, but they're not using him. I don't know what is going on at St Kilda this year. Their list needs a hard look at. They need to look internally before they look at externally. I don't think they can afford to be splashing the money that they're throwing around so willingly. Like, here's $7 million, here's $8 million. I don't know. I do not know, Liam. I appreciate the questions, but I'm still sitting here scratching my head wondering what the fuck is going on. The final game of the round, and the reason this video took so long to get out this week, was Easter Monday with Geelong taking on Hawthorn. Again, another great rivalry that we pencil into our AFL calendars. This game didn't disappoint, with Geelong winning by 7 points. 12 goals, 14.86, playing 11 goals, 13.79. We had James Sicily yet again have a shot on goal late in the game to turn the tides, and he missed again. It'd be getting stuck in his head. 2 games I've seen where he's been able to possibly go back and win a game off his own boot in recent years, in the last 12 months, and has failed to deliver. And you could see the look on his face when it happened. You could see the anguish on his face after the game. I feel for him, because this was a game that I felt in part was a genuine arm wrestle. At quarter time, Geelong led by 11 points, 29-18. At half time, they led by 10 points, 50-40. At 3/4 time, they were only ahead by 6 points, 66 playing 72. And then at the end of the game, they end up winning, as I said, by that 7-point margin. And that wasn't without Hawthorn stemming the flow in that final term. They had it, and it fell out of their hands. And it comes with a little bit of transgression, and we've already had the tribunal outcome for it, so we can report on it. We obviously saw 2 weeks ago in Gather Round Patrick Voss from Fremantle with the clothesline action against Nick Vlosten. I can't remember if it was 2 or 3 weeks he copped for that, but his ban was upheld. Connor Nash did something incredibly similar to Brian Myers. The only difference was Brian Myers was knocked the fuck out. He was referred straight to the tribunal, Connor Nash, which means genuinely they're looking at giving at least a minimum of 4 weeks. And that is where they landed. They suspended him for 4. They found that his action wasn't within the realms of a football act, even though Connor Nash tried to say he was making a play for the ball. Don't know how swinging your arm into somebody's head is making a play, but he's out for 4 weeks, and that still just speaks to inconsistencies about the MRO and the AFL. You've got Mansell that goes out for 3 for a push. Logan Morris pushes somebody into a pack and doesn't get anything. Patrick Voss gets 2 or 3. Connor Nash gets 4. You've got fucking Dan Houston, hip and shoulders a bloke in the head a few weeks ago. He only gets 2 weeks. It's a raffle. It's like playing roulette. You put a ball in a wheel, you spin it, and wherever it lands, that's how many weeks you're going to get. And unfortunately, I've used the term plenty of times, and I'll say it again, a circus continues to be a circus while clowns are in charge. Until you change out the clowns, the circus might be able to change. Laura Kane, get fucked. Michael Christensen, go get fucked. You've got fucking the other dickhead, Gil McLaughlin's fucking best mate. I still don't know his fucking name because I don't give 2 fucks. I feel they fumbled by not having Brendan Gale as CEO, but Brendan Gale was obviously more interested in trying to help Tasmania get off the ground, and I fully respect that. But we're getting the same outcomes because we're recycling people within the same group, or we're bringing people in that have no fucking idea about football. It is about time the competition was led by people that have a sound knowledge of what's going on, that understand what the people at home want, who understand proper adjudication and justification for suspensions and finding consistency. It's a ramble that I'm going on, and it's out of this outcome, which was unfortunate. We had a hilarious fucking outcome in this game. Fucking Bailey Smith grabbing the ball and just fucking dunk into Impey's head. I thought that was fucking hilarious. I couldn't help myself. But, alas, we won't talk about it because we'll be here for a very fucking long time. But at the end of the day, That outcome has been charged by the MRO. I don't think they're going to, they're going to appeal that. They're going to take that 4 weeks, I feel. But Geelong starting to get back to their best. Hawthorn still showing that there is a lot of fight in them, but failed to hit the mark again. I don't think they're dropping off of, there's no alarm bells ringing here. There's no sirens to be heard. Hawthorn is still going to play finals this year. It's just a matter of where they finish. And Geelong, I feel, at their best, have still performed as one of the best, if not the best teams in the competition this year collectively. At the end of 9 games, at the conclusion of Easter Monday, this is how our AFL ladder sits heading into tonight's clash against Melbourne and Richmond. Huge implications on the ladder because going into the round, Brisbane and the Gold Coast were undefeated. Both of them lost this week, so there has been some shifts. Collingwood have moved up into the number 1 slot, with Brisbane sitting in second, tied for first place, but there is a considerable 31% dividing them, and that percentage is huge when it comes down to it. In third place, we have the Gold Coast Suns, with GWS sitting in 4th. Both teams moving down the ladder, but still sitting within the top 4. Behind them, we have Adelaide in 5th, Geelong in 6th, and Hawthorn in 7th. But from 3rd to 7th, we are all tied on 16 points, all separated by percentage, with Gold Coast sitting with the most percentage within the top 8, let alone in the entire competition, with 150% total. The Bulldogs have moved up into 8th spot, rounding up the top 8. Fremantle have dropped out to 9th, Port Adelaide have moved up to 10th, Essendon have moved up to 11th, and St Kilda have dropped down to 12th. Again, all tied for that 8th spot, separated by percentage. We have Carlton, who have moved up to 13th, Sydney have slipped to 14th, and Richmond have moved up to 15th, all effectively tied on 13th spot, again, separated by percentage. North Melbourne have dropped to 16th. Melbourne stay in 17th, having picked up a win, but having a lesser percentage than North Melbourne. And the only team to still pick up a win for the year is West Coast, who is sitting in 18th place. And with the formalities out of the way, now we can dive into the good stuff. We can get into the more creative, opinion-based things. We get into the Hip and Shoulder MVP award, and we get into the Team of the Week, which I have created within this season. Both of which are pretty easy concepts to get on board with. The MVP award acts as a 3-2-1 vote Brownlow structure, and at the end of the year, whoever has the most amount of votes is the person I felt who was the most valuable player in the competition. And then Team of the Week was just something I brought into the mix because when it comes to the votes, players are going to miss because I can only pick 3. But there might be somebody who played in their position better than any other player within that position for the week. And I felt, what better way to create more discussion points than to create a Team of the Week and throw it out not only onto this video, but onto social media as well, and see where it sits with people. And it has been creating conversation. So if you've been one of those people who have been checking out my videos and have been leaving comments and have been hitting me up on social media, I thank you guys a lot, because that is what this is about. But it's time to dive into the votes, ladies and gentlemen, and we're kicking it off with Thursday night with Brisbane taking on Collingwood. 1 vote, Jamie Elliott. 13 disposals, 8 kicks and 5 handballs, 7 marks, 1 tackle, 200 metres gained, 2 goals, and 9 score involvements. 2 votes, Josh Dacos. 30 disposals, 17 kicks and 13 handballs, 5 marks, 1 clearance, 599 metres gained, 1 goal, and 6 score involvements. And 3 votes, Nick Dacos. 38 disposals, 21 kicks, 17 handballs, 6 marks, 3 tackles, 8 clearances, 645 metres gained, 1 goal, and 12 score involvements. North Melbourne versus Carlton. 1 vote, Charlie Curnow. 15 disposals, 11 kicks, 4 handballs, 5 marks, 2 tackles, 231 metres gained, 4 goals, and 11 score involvements. 2 votes, Adam Chera. 28 disposals, 16 kicks, 12 handballs, 4 marks, 4 tackles, 5 clearances, 555 metres gained, 1 goal, and 9 score involvements. And 3 votes, George Hewitt. 34 disposals, 13 kicks, 21 handballs, 1 mark, 9 tackles, 12 clearances, 417 metres gained, 1 goal, and 8 score involvements. West Coast versus Essendon. 1 vote, Jake Waterman. 13 disposals, 11 kicks, 2 handballs, 10 marks, 355 metres gained, 4 goals and 8 score involvements. 2 votes, Zach Merritt. 26 disposals, 12 kicks, 14 handballs, 4 marks, 1 tackle, 7 clearances, 273 metres gained, and 5 score involvements. And 3 votes, Peter Wright. 17 disposals, 11 kicks, 6 handballs, 7 marks, 3 tackles, 5 hitouts, 281 metres gained, 6 goals, and 9 score involvements. Melbourne versus Fremantle. 1 vote, Max Gawn. 28 disposals, 12 kicks, 16 handballs, 7 marks, 31 hitouts, 10 clearances, 144 metres gained, and 12 score involvements. 2 votes, Andrew Brayshaw. 33 disposals, 15 kicks, 18 handballs, 3 marks, 3 tackles, 8 clearances, 457 metres gained, 1 goal, and 10 score involvements. 3 votes, Keziah Pickett. 24 disposals, 16 kicks, 6 handballs, 5 marks, 3 tackles, 4 clearances, 475 metres gained, 5 goals, and 10 score involvements. Adelaide versus GWS. 1 vote, Lachie Whitfield. 39 disposals, 27 kicks, 12 handballs, 10 marks, 2 tackles, 2 clearances, 735 metres gained, and 3 score involvements. 2 votes, Tom Green. 36 disposals, 14 kicks, 22 handballs, 4 marks, 3 tackles, 7 clearances, 475 metres gained, and 2 score involvements. With 3 votes going to Jordan Dawson. 27 disposals, 22 kicks, 5 handballs, 5 marks, 8 tackles, 5 clearances, 620 metres gained, and 5 score involvements. Richmond versus Gold Coast. 1 vote, Noah Anderson. 32 disposals, 20 kicks, 12 handballs, 5 marks, 3 tackles, 9 clearances, 802 metres gained, and 7 score involvements. 2 votes, Tim Taranto. 25 disposals, 14 kicks, 21 handballs, 4 marks, 6 tackles, 6 clearances, 490 metres gained, 1 goal, and 3 score involvements. 3 votes, Nick Vlosten. 27 disposals, 24 kicks, 3 handballs, 13 marks, 4 tackles, 661 metres gained, and 3 score involvements. Sydney versus Port Adelaide. 1 vote, Matt Roberts. 30 disposals, 15 kicks, 15 handballs, 6 marks, 2 tackles, 1 clearance, 598 metres gained, and 9 score involvements. 2 votes, Connor Rosey. 27 disposals, 21 kicks, 6 handballs, 4 marks, 3 tackles, 3 clearances, 825 metres gained, 1 goal, and 6 score involvements. With 3 votes going to Zach Butters. 27 disposals, 13 kicks, 14 handballs, 5 marks, 8 tackles, 7 clearances, 390 metres gained, and 6 score involvements. Western Bulldogs versus St Kilda. 1 vote, Tom Liberatore. 29 disposals, 15 kicks, 14 handballs, 4 marks, 7 tackles, 3 clearances, 434 metres gained, 1 goal, and 8 score involvements. 2 votes, Riley Sanders. 32 disposals, 11 kicks, 21 handballs, 11 marks, 4 tackles, 1 clearance, 226 metres gained, 1 goal, and 14 score involvements. And 3 votes, Marcus Bontempelli. 30 disposals, 14 kicks, 16 handballs, 5 marks, 4 tackles, 8 clearances, 442 metres gained, 2 goals, and 12 score involvements. Geelong versus Hawthorn. 1 vote, Kyle Amon. 29 disposals, 21 kicks, 8 handballs, 5 marks, 4 tackles, 1 clearance, 802 metres gained, and 3 score involvements. 2 votes, Tom Atkins. 24 disposals, 7 kicks, 17 handballs, 1 mark, 9 tackles, 7 clearances, 157 metres gained, and 8 score involvements. And 3 votes, Jai Newcomb. 28 disposals, 7 kicks, 21 handballs, 6 marks, 9 tackles, 4 clearances, 238 metres gained, and 8 score involvements. At the end of round 6, this is how our top 3 are situated for the MVP award for 2025. In 3rd place on 9 votes, we have Essendon's Zach Merritt and Port Adelaide's Connor Rozee. In 2nd place on 10 votes, we have Adelaide's Jordan Dawson. And in 1st place on 11 votes, we have Collingwood's Nick Dacos. For the eagle-eyed viewers at home, I've had a costume change. Why? I spilled fucking coffee all over myself because I'm a moron. But let's forget about that. It's not about me. It is now about Team of the Week for round 6. And there have been some selections that I feel might upset some people, but I think this is the best possible team that I've been able to put together. I have wrestled with bringing people in, with putting people out, but this is where I have landed for the week. In defence, we have Lockie Whitfield and Jeremy McGovern in the back pockets, and Noah Bolter at full back. Across half back, I have Josh Dacos and Jake Bowie, with Nick Vlosten at centre half back. Across the midfield, I have Riley Sanders and Carl Amon on the wings, with Tim Taranto in the centre. Our forward line is comprised of Keziah Pickett and Shea Bolton on the half-forward flanks, and Charlie Curnow at centre half-forward. In the forward pockets, we have Jake Waterman and Marcus Bontempelli, with Peter Wright at full forward. Our followers see Max Gawn in the ruck, Nick Dacos in ruck rover, and George Hewitt as our rover. The interchange has Andrew Brayshaw, Zach Butters, Jai Newcomb, and Tom Green. Our sub this week actually was a sub, and I'm selecting Aaron Francis because to come on as a sub late in the game, kick 3 goals and almost win your team the game, definitely deserving of that mantle. And coach of the round, I wrestled with a couple, but for Richmond to come back against the wall and beat Gold Coast at Marvel in the emphatic way that they played, I've landed with Adam Uze as coach of the week. This could have easily been Craig McRae from Collingwood, and I wrestled with the decision. And as much as I loved Collingwood's win against Brisbane, Richmond coming out and playing that brand and defeating the Gold Coast at Marvel Stadium when we usually get belted there, Adam Uze, he gets the nod this week. That is it for today's video. I do hope you guys enjoyed. I do apologise that it dropped later in the week, but now that we are back to a Thursday to Sunday fixture, I am hoping this will now be back to either Monday or Tuesday next week, a little bit earlier in the week for you to take in. I do appreciate if you have turned out to watch this video. Again, if you've got any questions that you would like me to answer about your team, how they're performing, if you want to give me any, opinions about how you feel your team's performing, let me know in the comment section down below. I'm also open in the comments down below to suggestion for any AFL-based content that you guys would like to see. If you've got suggestions, let me know about them. But that is it. I am done. Do leave a like on the video. Get on board the community we are building if you wish by hitting that subscribe button. But that's it from me, guys. I'm out of here. And as always, I will catch you guys next time.